Welcome to another episode of Ship a War, my review of Divergent. Divergent is directed by Neil Burger. It stars Shailene Woodley, Miles Teller, Kate Winslet, Ashley Judd, and a bunch of other very talented actors and actresses. Now, the premise of this story, it takes place in the future. It takes place in Chicago. Chicago isn't the Chicago we know of today. It looks like something really horribly wrong happened there, and basically everywhere else in United States, because Chicago is pretty much the only place that seems to have any type of human life there. And because of that, they have like this humongous wall surrounding it to keep whatever that's out there to stay out of the city and keep the people within to stay within the city. And it goes even a step further where they have this idea of splitting every person into 5 factions, and each faction does different things for the community in Chicago. And the 5 factions, which names I can't remember for the life of me, but they all have 5 different virtues, and those 5s is bravery, peacefulness, selflessness, honesty, and then knowledge. When they turn a certain age, they pick the faction and they end up joining that faction, and once they join that faction, they're there for the rest of their lives. It focuses on one character played by Shailene Woodley, and her character's name is Beatrice, but she later changes her name to Triss. And you basically follow her story and the things that happen to her, because unlike everybody else, she's different. She is what's considered a divergent. She has the ability to be part of more than 1 or 2 or 3. They're very devoted to their faction, and because she doesn't really fit in any of them, she becomes a problem. And throughout the movie, we learn why she becomes a problem due to being different from everybody else. And that's basically the story of the movie without saying too much and spoiling it for those who have never read the books. Me personally, I've never read any of the books to the Divergent. I don't know nothing about them. So I went into this movie pretty blind to the actual story to it. And I have to be completely honest, I enjoyed it for what it was. Even though I wasn't disappointed with the movie, I felt there were certain things they could have done better, but there were certain things in the movie that I really liked. For example, I really liked all the characters. I thought all the characters were very likable. The cast that they have for this movie is pretty damn wonderful. Like, every actor does their thing with their characters, and they're all very enjoyable. I also really liked the soundtrack to the movie. There were some songs in there that really went with the film, so I really liked that as well. But of course, I felt like the story itself, even though as interesting as it may sound, or as interesting as I thought it was, they were doing a good job with it at a certain point, and it kind of fell apart at a certain point that I'm like, God, they could have done a little, tweaking here and there to make this story even more interesting than what it is. Also, I feel like what else took away from the film is that this movie is a soft PG-13, and those who know soft PG-13 know that the bloodshed and the violence are not going to be shown on camera. And I feel like a lot of really intense emotional scenes that would have worked great if they added, the blood and the actual showing of what took place to a certain character, that it would have driven the point a lot harder than just showing a glimpse of it and then cutting away from it really quickly, and then you really don't get that emotional attachment to what took place to that certain character or to that certain situation that just happened, that in reality is really gory and terrible. Because this movie had some pretty intense scenes in it that I feel like if this was like a R-rated movie, it would have been pretty bad. But because it's not, and they really tried not to make the movie very violent, it took away a lot of that emotional intenseness of a particular scene that would have worked better if they had it there. The other complaint that I have is the CGI wasn't that great. Even though certain scenes, it looked good, there was other scenes that were like, oh, that could have been done better, and it kind of took you out of the scene. But it isn't something that overall ruins the movie. But again, there's some positive in this movie. As I mentioned before, the soundtrack is good, the actors are wonderful, the characters are very enjoyable, and I also thought the romance in the movie was done pretty well, because they don't rush it. It's not rushed at all. They kind of build up to it. At a certain point, I was like, isn't there a romance between Shailene Woodley's character and Theodore James's character. I mean, I'm pretty sure I saw that in the trailer somewhere. When is it gonna happen? I mean, it got to that point that it took a while for them to get to the romance, and I actually liked that. I liked the fact that they built it up rather than just rushing it together, force it down your throat like this is happening, take it now. But it wasn't like that, and I really liked that they actually built up the romance in a more realistic way rather than just throwing them together. Overall, it was a pretty enjoyable movie. I liked it for what it was. Do I wish the story was a tad bit better done, or at least written better or something? I don't know. I've never read the books. Maybe there's more to it that I'm missing. Maybe if there's a sequel, I will watch this first movie and be like, okay, that made sense why they did it that way. I feel like I'm sounding too negative towards it, but it really wasn't a bad movie. I actually really enjoyed it. I actually came out of the theater saying, that was not so bad. I actually enjoyed this movie. I was expecting to not really care for it. And the reason why is because, honestly, the trailers did absolutely nothing for me. But overall, it was an enjoyable film. I'm looking forward to seeing a sequel to it because I'm actually interested in seeing where the story goes with these characters. I would say those who are a fan of the book, go see this movie, because the people I was with who were fans of the book, they all enjoyed it. They all thought that it did a wonderful job translating the book into film. Anybody who is curious to see it, go see it. Anybody who's a fan of any of the actors in this movie, go see it. Again, the best thing about this movie is definitely all the characters overall when it comes to this film. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Divergent. Thank you for watching, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. So the big news that released this past week is the cast for the reboot of Fantastic Four has been announced. So the cast for this new reboot are Miles Teller as Mr. Fantastic, Kate Mara as the Invisible Woman, Michael B. Jordan as the Torch, and Jamie Bell as the Thing. People's reaction to this casting have been pretty negative and also positive, and then there is the mixed reactions to it. And I'm personally